Why don't we bring people into understanding why you're qualified to do those things, right? Maybe give them a little bit of the background of who you are and what you've done before stepping into this.
So, so professionally, so academically and professionally, both, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
So my undergraduate's in mechanical engineering. And leaving that was what, in hindsight now, was the first third of my 3 careers. So, yeah, if you will, I could break it into thirds at this point. So leaving engineering school, I was focused on the commercialization of new products, or bringing new products to market on the technical side of organizations, obviously, as an engineer. And again, in hindsight now, excuse me, that's...
The cat's getting you?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, the old cat allergy.
The cat allergy.
Here at the
Sorry
farm.
About that.
The commercializing new products is almost identical to bringing an emerging company to market, or entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to unpack that a little bit, just to understand like what that means, commercializing a new product.
Yeah. So in my experience prior, it was in established companies. So we had a cash cow, we had a revenue generator, whatever that was, and we were trying to bring our next sustainable competitive advantage to market. We're trying to bring the next product or service to market. So when you're talking about physical products in a technical environment, it's a little different than a service. But at the end of the day, there's a couple key components. One key component is you have to separate technology development from new product commercialization.
Okay.
You can't mix the two. It's a longer story as to why. It's how we separate it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to bring a new product to market, the technology has to be proven, mature, and established and ready to go. So what do I mean by that? If we were bringing the microwave to market right now, and if that thing inside the microwave that creates the microwave energy wasn't reliable, didn't last for decades, wasn't financially viable, right? That would still be in the technology development cycle. We wouldn't want to even talk about bringing the microwave to market until that little core thing that makes the radiations working. So separating those two things is critical, number one. Number two, when you get into the new product commercialization life cycle, there's a series of phases that you go through that mature not only the product you're bringing to market, but the business around the product, so it can deliver it and service the client successfully when it's launched. So you kind of walk through those phases. Those phases have subtly different names depending on which sector you're in, but ultimately the work is the same, where you start with a proof of concept, then you validate that, then you verify that, then you validate it, then you go into a pilot phase, and you go into production. So marching through those phases, each brings on another level of maturity in the product and the infrastructure around it for it to ultimately be successful when it comes to market. And that's where the parallels come in with bringing a company to market. Entrepreneurship's become super popular in like the last decade.
Yeah.
In my limited experience with entrepreneurship, the good ones, the ones that are successful, are following the same roadmap that all classic new product delivery follows, but they're doing it in the launch of their company and the associated product, not just a new product in an established company.
So give us that path one more time.
Yeah, so you start out with proof of concept,
Okay.
which is what it sounds like. It's an idea. And you take that proof of concept and you go through a phase called verification.
Okay.
And then once you've successfully exited verification, you go into validation. And these are steps in increased maturity of the product, the ability to produce it, the ability to support it, the ability to sell it, market it, all of the things. And then once you've exited validation, now you go into pilot. And pilot is the first time when you'd really be bringing that to any kind of mass market. You might limit your pilot, but you're going to mass market. So anything before pilot, you're working with early adopters, lighthouse customers, partners, et cetera, to get voice of customer, to iterate, to make changes, to do all those things. But when you exit validation and you go into pilot, that's the first time that you're really bringing it to the market. And again, you may segment the market, but you're really bringing it to the market. And what that means is the people receiving that product have expectations of it performing, not expectations of it being a new idea or a development, right? And then you leave pilot and go into full production, which is, commercial launch, et cetera, of whatever that product is. So
that's interesting. I never thought about that from a process standpoint. And I was asking to have you say it again, because I was like thinking, we're just launching our time bank software.
Oh, right.
And so I was thinking, well, where are we in that phase, right? Like, because I didn't use those names as we've gone through, but like we created it. and then we used it for a year, and then we brought on beta testers, which
Right.
I'm wondering, like, would beta testers be the pilot?
Now, typically beta would be before the pilot.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where the lingo comes in. So there's verification and validation. There's alpha and beta. There's several different sets of lingo depending on which vertical you're in. But yeah.
So when we left beta and we went to what we're calling our soft launch, that was really our pilot then.
right.
Yeah. So we actually started selling it to a small, and which is what where we are right now as a stage, right? Is we're selling it to small number of companies. We're not, blasting it out there with Google ads or any of those things.
Sure.
And we're actually, kind of, I don't want to say still on that beta side, but we are using this pilot to kind of further validate like the software and, what did we forget?
Sure.
Or what did we miss, or what would make it easier? So like one of the things that we're actually doing right now is automating the sign up process. So we came out of beta with it and we started selling it to people, but the onboard people was clunky.
Right.
Right. So it was like, it wasn't an automated thing because we didn't want everybody signing up for it. Not that everybody would be, but we wanted to make sure we could control who our first users were and all those kinds of things. So it's been very clunky. So now though, as we're getting ready to leave that pilot stage into what was the last stage you called it?
Production.
So as we get ready to leave that pilot stage, and we need to make sure that people can go to the website, learn about the software, and then if they want to sign up right then and there and start using the
So
software.
you're starting to mature the rest of the systems around your offering. That's
Okay.
what you're saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of stumbling,
awesome.
stumbling through a similar track. Exactly.
Yeah, stumbling is definitely the word.
Yeah. Well, hey, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
If it's successful. But interestingly enough, and I'd have to have my LinkedIn open to point to the years, but this work was after my undergraduate, right? So I mean, this is like late 90s, right? And fast forward a few years ago, a guy launched a book, and the book was getting a lot of traction. So I was really curious what it was. I flipped it open and flipped through some pages. I'm like, man, if I was smart enough to have written a book about what I did back then, this is what this guy did. Like
That's what he was writing.
He was clearly exposed to the same systems and processes and way of executing that I'm talking about. And he took it and he titled it The Lean Startup. And he marketed it to startup organizations. I was like, man, solid gold. Like again, reading a book is one thing, implementing it and being successful is a whole nother story.
Oh, yeah.
But everything he wrote about was what we were doing and teaching and helping other people do back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And fast forward to, I don't even know when the book came out, but it was probably 2020 or something like that. He was smart enough to take it and put it in a book, and I'm sure he's retired. I'm still working.
Yeah, I don't know. From what I understand about books, they're not that, profitable. But
Good. I'll tell myself that since I haven't written one yet.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they don't make money, but most people I know that make money with books have 20 of them out there.
And I think it's the speaking engagements and the other things that come from it. Right?
Yeah.
So that's new product commercialization or bringing new products to market, and that was the first third of my professional career. And during that time, a few things happened. One, I was sitting next to, I was an engineer, and I was in an engineering department. So I'm in the office, right? This is, again, this is in the 90s. So I'm sitting in an office and look at the guy next to me, and he's the smartest guy I've ever met. And look at the guy next to me over there, and he's the smartest guy I've ever met. And they're both disgruntled as hell. And I was, sitting to myself thinking, shit, I can't sit next to these guys the rest of my, I mean, they're awesome. I can learn from these people, but like just the social component of sitting next to, and these two people represent a whole population, right?
Right.
And so like of engineers in an office somewhere. Not all engineers, but to be clear, but unfortunately a lot. And I thought to myself, man, I can't sit next to these people the rest of my life at work.
Yeah.
Like this isn't going to work for me. So I begrudgingly went back and said, how do I transition from where I am to something else, as effectively as possible? And at the time, going back from my MBA was what kind of rose up as the opportunity to transition from engineering, off the engineering curve kind of, and onto the business curve, if you will, or leadership curve.
Yeah.
That's one thing that came out of that. The other thing that came out of that time was, so I did that. I went back to school at night, actually. Part of me wishes I did an executive MBA at the time, which was a contemplation, but I went at night. But either way, so the MBA came out of that. And then something else came out of that. And that was, I realized I was asked to turn around a couple companies that were having trouble delivering new products to market. And as I was doing that, it kind of dawned on me that the work I was doing to turn around this failure to deliver new products was work that I could apply to any other failure or problem or challenge. And that the success I was having and the way I was executing was just more broadly applicable. So the MBA combined with that learning, and I had also at that time priceless learning through an incredible mentor. So I'll spare you the long story, but a fellow named Roger, he took over the leadership of a startup company that I was part of at the time. And again, long story short, I kind of stuck my neck out unknowingly at the time. More of kind of a stupid young kid, like kind of opened my mouth. And Roger kind of called me out on it. Again, a longer story. And then next thing you know, kind of got pulled under his wing and became his right-hand man. And he opened up his network to me and a number of other opportunities to learn and to grow as a professional. So, so those three things are what kind of catapulted me into phase two. The other thing too, not sure if the audio will come through, but we talked about how the tooth was originally injured.
Yeah.
So coming off of that experience, one of the things that I vowed to myself personally was to never, ever be a victim again or allow anybody in my presence to be a victim. And that is a pledge I made to myself that I kept quiet for a long time, but I talk a little bit more about now because I think there's value in sharing that with other people. Maybe it's inspirational, maybe not, but either way, there's value. When I met Roger, he had a very similar motto. He was an orphan, actually, and went to become this incredible professional success that books were written about. And he's since written books and just an incredible, incredible person. So his commitment to being self-deterministic and never being a victim was something personally that resonated with me from my experience as well. And I think was probably an undertone in our relationship that he maybe saw in me as well. And as a result, took me under his wing to grow.
Yeah.
So that's kind of exiting that phase, the new product commercialization phase, and then rolling into the helping businesses navigate through significant challenges. So that was kind of the middle phase or the second phase of my career. In essence, part of that time, I almost worked as an internal consultant for a large organization, basically. It was kind of a weird genesis of how that happened or how that came to be. But at the end of the day, I was working inside a Fortune 50 company and kept getting pulled in to help them solve different problems. These were problems from the financial side of the organization, for example. And again, I'd have to look at my LinkedIn, but I don't remember the specific numbers, but let's just say you had 20 million in outstanding money that needed to be collected. So the business basically had a $20 million line of credit out to several clients of them because they just couldn't get out of the blocks and bill these people on time and get the money. And we're getting near year end, and it's a publicly traded company, so they want that 20 million on the books, not out as a liability or what have you. So I was charged with pulling that money in as one of the problems. Another problem that needed to be solved for that company was it was a U.S. and German-centric operation, and they decided they wanted to go over, quote, rest of world. So they...
World domination.
Yeah, right. So big business stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I was charged with figuring out how to enable guys in India that show up to a construction site in flip-flops to install these big pieces of equipment with the same level of excellence as a German craftsman or an American redneck.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the second phase of my career was working inside the largest of large, Fortune 50 American companies, helping them solve various problems. And all during that time, I had made a commitment. Well, if I rewind back to meeting Roger, he asked me kind of what did I want to do when I grew up. And I told him I needed to run part of his business so that I'd be prepared to run my own someday. Basically, that was what I told him at the time. That first day that I was in his office, I met, which again is a longer story in itself. And then I kind of called myself on that years later, and I was kind of coasting, working for a big company. The work was really pretty easy for me because of some of the experiences I'd had and what have you. And I was chasing some things personally at the time, which I was, as you know, I was semi-pro racing or semi-pro is the best way to sum it up, racing motorcycles, road racing. So I was road racing, kind of doing my job relatively easy. Road racing took a lot of time to pursue. and I was kind of having fun and forgot about my professional goals. So I called myself on and said, hey, Bill, you told yourself that you were going to start your own company. And that kind of rolls into the third phase where I stepped out on my own and started HR Resolved. And during the time that we were starting HR Resolved, I actually collected a severance from one of those large companies. So that helped me through the first year of HR Resolved. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to replace my corporate salary,
Sure.
if you will, and how long it was going to take. So once I got done living off that severance, I needed to have some pretty accelerated growth in HR Resolved, or I needed to supplement someplace else. And this was one of the times where it's a joke for me that tansy luck, it's not very good, right? So that's a running joke among friends. But this was one of the times where that wasn't the case. But one of the larger local businesses who was around 90 million in revenue, and since I said that, I'll leave the name of the business out.
Yeah.
They wanted to grow to 100 million in revenue, and the founder and president of that business had known a little bit about what I was doing. Maybe he had connected with me on LinkedIn or had talked to Katie or something at the gym. We worked out at the same gym at the time, CrossFit at the time.
Yep.
And anyway, he reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to have lunch? I hear, you're on your own now, and I'd like to talk to you about a business system to enable my business to cross that 100 million mark. So we're prepped for acquisition. And he hired me to do what I'm doing now as the Operational Excellence Shop, and that was the beginning of the OpEx Shop.